Okay, we are closing in on the end. This is So Be It, and this will be chapter 20, and then I'm also going to read chapter 21 on this segment of video. This chapter is called Uh-Oh. Diane DeMuth is your grandmother, Heidi, and her daughter, Sophia, is your mother, Thurman Hill began. It had not even been 24 hours since I had stood in front of that same red chair, hearing Elliot say Mama's word. Now here I was again, frozen in time as I heard Mama's name for the first time. Sophia. When Diane came to me asking for help, I wished to God I had turned her away, sent her over to Roscoe or further north to one of the state-run facilities in Syracuse. Instead, I let her talk me into accepting Sophia as a charity case at Hilltop. She stayed here at no cost to her mother for a little over a year. She did well here. She was happy, and she had a best friend, Elliot. They were inseparable, Sophia and Elliot, and I was so happy for Elliot, who'd never really had friends. I was too foolish to see what was happening. When Diane came to me with the news that Sophia was pregnant, at first I didn't believe it. And when she accused Elliot of being the father, I thought it was impossible. He paused. They were like children themselves, he said. I hadn't been looking at him as he spoke. Instead, I'd kept my eyes fixed on the plant sitting next to his chair, the one with the long pointy leaves and the perfect little dangling flowers. I reached over then and took one of the fragile blossoms between my fingers. It came off easily and fell apart, the wrinkled petals falling down into the carpet like tiny white tears. It was real. The chances of Sophia and Elliot producing a normal child seem slim at best, he went on. I felt the right thing to do was to end the pregnancy, but Diane refused. She insisted that she could raise the baby herself. I didn't want anything to do with bringing another damaged child into the world, not after I'd seen the way Elliot suffered. Diane pleaded with me, and when that did no good, she threatened to go to the authorities. Hilltop's reputation would have been ruined. I would have lost everything. Thurman Hill sat forward in his chair, and as he moved, the sunlight coming through the big window behind him caught in the crystal of his watch, making a tiny circle of light dance up on the wall. And so we struck a bargain, he went on. I gave Diane enough money to take Sophia away to have her baby, and I agreed to give her more money every month to cover their living expenses. She chose the place, Reno, and I opened an account there, arranging for Diane's rent and utility bills to be paid directly from that account, so that I could keep track of how the money was being spent. She wasn't to contact me, not when the baby was born, not ever. I wasn't to know anything about their lives from that point on. I paid a small fortune not to know. Promises have been made and paid for. I knew that Elliot would miss his friend, but I thought that over time, like so many things, he would forget Sophia. If I had known how wrong I was about that, maybe I would have done things differently. Elliot was never the same after Sophia left. He cried a lot and banged his head at the slightest frustration, and as if that wasn't enough to fill me with guilt, for the past 13 years, at some point in the course of every single day, he has said your mother's name. He never forgot her. The biggest mistake I ever made was to think that Elliot's love wasn't deep because he had no words to express it. For the first time since he'd begun talking, I looked at Thurman Hill, my grandfather. There were dark circles under his eyes as though he hadn't slept well the night before, and he was rubbing his forehead with his fingertips. Our eyes met, and then I looked away. He sighed and sat back in the chair. For 13 years, Diane kept her end of the bargain, and while Elliot held on to his memories, I did my best to forget. Then out of the blue, I began to get calls from someone in Nevada named Bernadette. I thought it was Diane. I was sure it was. And when you came, I figured she'd sent you here to squeeze more money out of me. But there isn't any more. There's only Hilltop. And when I go, Hilltop is all that Elliot will have left. Thurman Hill stopped then and looked at me. Do you have any questions? He asked. All this truth spilling out around me, crashing over me in giant waves, left me sitting in the middle of the flood with nothing to say. What questions did I have? Only one, the same one I had started with. What is Soof? I asked. He smiled sadly. It was Elliot's nickname for your mother, he said. He couldn't pronounce Sophia, neither could your mother. She called herself... I knew it. So be it, I said. So be it, he answered, he echoed, and the way he said it, it sounded like Amen. Thurman Hill asked Roy and Mr. Dietz to come back in then to help fill in the last of the blanks. All those years of no rent or electricity bills were the result of a bank account in Reno that Thurman Hill had set up to pay out automatically. Where is my grandmother now? I asked. It was obvious from the way they looked at each other that they'd been expecting that question. I'm sorry, Heidi, but she's dead, he told me. I had the folks in Monticello run a cross-reference with Reno, and they had a certificate on file out there. The death certificate Roy had found for Diane DeMuth listed the cause of death as a traffic accident. She was hit by a bus, Roy told me. A bus? I said. Pronounced dead on arrival at County General Hospital in Reno, Nevada. Was it February? I asked. Yes, the 19th, Roy said. February 19th was the day Bernadette had found Mama standing outside her door holding me in her arms. In my head, a silent movie played. Mama and her mother, Diane DeMuth, standing on the corner waiting to cross the street. Something happens. Diane gets distracted and steps off the curb too early right as the giant blue and white bus rounds the corner. Mama's dress blows up and she tries to hold it down with one hand. Someone screams, and when Mama looks up, Diane is lying in the street. People come out of nowhere gathering around to try to help her. The driver jumps out and pushes through the crowd, leaning over her, feeling for a pulse. And in all the commotion, nobody notices the panicked young woman with the wide-set blue eyes clutching her crying baby to her chest and hurrying down the street toward an empty apartment. Dun, 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 Heidi, shh. But of course I was only guessing, because as I was finally beginning to understand, there are some things in life a person just can't know. At 1:45 that afternoon, I called Bernadette. She took a long time to answer, more than 10 rings. At first I thought maybe she wasn't there, but then I realized that was impossible. Bernie was always there. Finally, she did answer, but she sounded funny, far away. I thought we had a bad connection. Can you hear me, Bernie? I said. Yes, I can hear you, she said. I've been waiting for your call. I have so much to tell you. You won't believe it. Mama has a birthday, Bernie, and a mother and a name. Mama has a beautiful name. Not now, Bernie, baby, Bernie said. That wasn't at all what I expected to hear. Normally she would have started right in asking me questions, eager to hear what I'd found out. Instead, she asked if Ruby was there. Ruby? I said, no, I'm up at Hilltop, Bernie. Remember, I came with Roy. And Ruby's not there yet? She asked. No, she took the day off, Bernie. She's at home, I said. We'll talk later then, she said. You'll call me. Wait, Bernie, don't hang up. I want to tell you about Mama. Not now, baby. You'll call me, she said, and then she hung up. I stood there holding the phone for a while, not knowing what to think about what had just happened. Why didn't Bernie want to talk to me? Why did she sound so strange? Maybe Mama had kept her up all night or something. I walked through the parlor and out onto the front porch to get some air to clear my head. Everything was still spinning inside, and I felt dizzy. It was cold enough for me to see my breath that day out on the porch, and I remember someone was burning leaves nearby. I looked up to see if there were more birds, but the sky was completely empty. I heard a car coming up the driveway. It was a taxicab, and I was surprised to see that Ruby was in the back seat. I stood up and watched her through the window as she paid the driver. She got out and slammed the door, but when I think back on it now, it's strange that I don't remember it making a sound. It was as if the world suddenly had the volume turned down. The wind gusted and blew a strand of hair across Ruby's face. It caught between her lips and she brushed it away, tucking it behind her ear. She didn't say hello. She just walked quickly over to where I was standing and put her arms around me. And suddenly, I knew. That sorrowful mist I'd loosed from the drawer hadn't come looking for Ruby at all. It had come looking for me. As it worked its icy fingers into me and wound itself around my heart, Ruby whispered softly, "Poor thing, poor, poor thing." Chapter 21. Ow. Even though my grandmother and my mother died almost 13 years apart, it felt as if I had lost them both on the same day. After Ruby hugged me, she took me inside. Bernie had called her and asked her to be there with me when I heard about Mama. She dialed the number for me, and I held the phone to my ear and listened. "Your Mama went in her sleep, baby. I thought she was just sleeping off that awful headache, the one I told you about that was so bad. But after a while, when she didn't wake up, I went to check on her. And she was dead? Mama is dead?" As soon as I said it, I couldn't stand being inside my own skin anymore. I wanted to turn myself inside out, shake the feelings off like fire ants. It was all my fault. I'd been so wrapped up in what was happening to me, I hadn't even asked about Mama that morning. Bernadette knew she was getting worse. "Your Mama and I need you to come home." But I hadn't listened. Bernie tried to comfort me. She told me I couldn't have made it there in time to say goodbye anyway. Ruby held me and patted my back, and Roy wrapped his big, strong arms around us both like string around a package. We drove back to the house, where Ruby ran me a bath and tucked me into bed, even though it was still afternoon. She brought me soup, which I couldn't eat, and sat by me until finally I managed to fall asleep. It was dark out when I woke up, and the house was quiet. I lay there for a while, trying not to think, trying not to feel. I wished it would all go away. I closed my eyes and pulled the pillow over my head. Something cold and smooth touched my cheek, and I realized it was the notebook I'd put under the pillow the night before. I sat up and turned on the light. How could I have thought it was so important? So important to know. None of it mattered. Knowing didn't change what was. One by one, I ripped the pages out of the notebook, crumpling them and throwing them on the floor, till there was nothing left between the worn red covers. I turned out light out and lay back down on my side with my arms crossed tightly over my chest. Holding myself like that, I rocked. "Done, done, done," I whispered as the cold, damp mist swirled around me in the dark. "Done, done, done, Heidi, shh." That's the end. Chapter 21.